So I did. And I've been fighting on them for executive commission for 41 years. I have a radio show that every week we do what's called a Obama Minute. And we keep a running count on the clemency process. One of the things we suggest, and I like to share with you this morning, is that President Obama has 9 months left in office. And he went into prison. The first president is done. And when you come into prison, when you're the president, and you give guys and women hope, that's hope. And now he's leaving in 9 months, and less than 5,000, less than 2,000 people got pardons. We can expedite the pardon process, the clemency process. How? We can use Title 18, 20 of the Criminal Code, Section 4082. The president has the Attorney General has the power to extend the limits of confinement. You don't have to be in jail to serve the time, because he gave these guys hope that you're coming out of prison. He can release everybody on the 4082 on the 4 grounds: education, employment, medical, and family reasons. And let them know that the federal prison have everybody on a computer. So they know who's eligible to come out, who's non-violent, who's
perfect.
Eligible to come out. We can do this.
Thank you, Mr. Roach. Thank you, Mr. Roach. Thank you. Again, I won't say probably not the most senior person, but the person who probably received a commutation the furthest time ago. Again, wanted just to give you the opportunity. But thank you, Mr. Roach. With that, we are going to end with really one of the driving forces in this building around the issue of criminal justice reform, who has visited a number of programs and efforts across the country along with the president on her own. Senior advisor to the president, and also happens to be my boss as well, Valerie Jarrett.
I said to Elias, good job. Didn't he do an amazing job today? Norman said he had to put himself in a position to receive the blessings that he did receive. Put himself in the position. And when he said that, I was sitting here thinking to myself, every American needs to put themselves in the position to have the grace to listen to what we heard today and yesterday. Every American, I wish, were watching what we had the honor of hearing over the last 2 days, because if they did, they would realize the responsibility that we all have collectively to perfect our union begins with understanding that none of us are perfect. None of us are perfect, but we can all do better. And that if we do that, as Mark said, that's how we reclaim our Constitution. That's how we find our soul. And as Cynthia said, it's by allowing ourselves to be proximate. And that to me means to actually listen and get to know one another. So last night I couldn't sleep. And as Carol, who I've known now over 30 years, could tell you, nothing gets in the way of my sleep. I'm one of those people where literally before my head hits the pillow, I am asleep. And I couldn't sleep last night. And the reason I couldn't sleep wasn't because I thought about the $80 billion that we spend every year on our criminal justice system. It wasn't because we have 5% of the world's population, yet 25% of the world's prisoners. It wasn't even because of the outrageous statistic that since 1985, the number of women in prison has gone up by 400%. And it wasn't even because of the joy I have that President Obama has commuted more folks than the last 6 presidents put together. That's not why I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep because I couldn't stop thinking about Kimba, who went to prison 7 months pregnant. And I thought about how I felt 7 months pregnant and the joy of the infinite possibilities that lay ahead, and the fact that she only had 2 days in the hospital with her baby before, thankfully, her parents were able to care for her baby. But I couldn't even imagine what that separation felt like. I couldn't sleep because I thought about the fact that Carol and I went to the University of Michigan and how much we complained about how hard Michigan was. And then I thought about Serena going to the University of Michigan after having been released from prison and the obstacles in her life. I couldn't sleep because I thought about the folks I had the honor of meeting yesterday, first in the Roosevelt Room and then at lunch with the president, where not one person made an excuse for the mistakes they had made in their life. Not one person tried to explain away those mistakes. They simply told their stories. with courage and grace and determination and Carol, come on, you're messing up my song. I'm just getting on a roll and Carol's messing me up. They told their stories with grace and honesty, and Ron said in the Roosevelt room there wasn't a dry eye in the room. And the tears that flowed out of joy were when we told them that 61 more people had been given a commutation, right? That's when the tears really started to flow. And when I drove with Neil and the president to lunch, and we were giving him a briefing about what we had talked about. And I started by saying I had burst into tears, and he said, well, that's not unusual. And then Neil said, well, Mr. President, I cried too. And he goes, well, that is a little unusual. And that's why when he walked in the room, I don't think he could fully appreciate the joy you all felt, because while we were meeting, several of you said, please tell Mr. President, thank you. And I'm telling you, I was like a child at Christmas. I could not contain myself. I kept saying, yes, we'll tell him. Knowing, I kept looking at the door. You probably wonder why my head kept turning like that, wondering when he was going to walk in and surprise you. And I kept thinking at lunch about Michael, talking about how all those years he was in prison, and the 6 years since, his wife stayed with him. And the president said to him, you better not mess up, boy, because you got yourself an extraordinary woman who stuck by you. And the fact that what everyone who was with us at that lunch had in common really was people in their corner. And when the president said to them, because to me they are extraordinary. First of all, are they not extraordinary people? And part of what made them so extraordinary was when the president said to them, are you exceptional? Are you different? Are you extraordinary? And they all said, no, we left behind. We left behind, and we feel so guilty about leaving behind people who are just like us and who are as deserving of a second chance as we are. More deserving in cases than perhaps we feel. And when Andrea and I had a conversation here yesterday, Andrea, you're still here, aren't you? I think I saw her earlier. There you are. Andrea has talked about just the burden she still feels to this day. And I was saying to a couple of you whose parents passed away while you were in prison and who feel that burden. And I started to think about, and Carol, remember this, when my dad died and I was able to hold his hand when he died, and how painful that moment was for me. And I know it pales in comparison to the pain you all felt when you couldn't be with your loved ones who passed away. And so I just want every American to be able to hear what we heard. And I think if they did, their hearts would open, and in that space, we would be able to perfect that union. It's just that simple. And so as hard as I know it must be for each of you to tell your stories over and over again, publicly and privately, and explaining to your children and to your parents and to the people who are supporting you, I'm here to say to you, it is so worth it to be able to do that, because that's how change happens in this country. It doesn't happen, as the president often says, from Washington, although you could not have a president who believes any more than President Obama in what we're trying to accomplish here today. That's not how change happens in our country. And it's never easy, and it's never pretty, and it's always hard, and there are people who are entrenched in the status quo, let's face it. There are people who like things just the way they are. I don't know how they have the mercy to call themselves oftentimes people of faith, and yet they like things the way they are. As the president said, we're getting into the term, so we say all kinds of things that we might not have always had. But I say that because I do believe, and many of you have said this, that we are in such a unique moment here. We are in a moment where we do have a president who's not only willing to go to a prison, but who sits down and actually listens to the stories of the people who he met with, who talk about how they took a plea. All 6 or 7 of the people he met with in El Reno all took a plea. 2 of who were incarcerated for the crime for which they are now serving at the time it was committed. And the president has told us over and over again, why would somebody plead guilty when they know they have the best excuse possible because the crime happened when they were in prison? He said, what happens that you have so little faith in the system that you plead guilty to a crime that occurred when you were in prison? Or when we were in Newark and he visited a reentry program cobbled together by a federal judge he appointed, a U.S. attorney who he appointed, and an amazing probation officer who came out of pocket to help a person who had been in prison for 10 years, who didn't know how to use a computer and only had the clothes on his back and was sleeping on a friend's couch and didn't have a job. And those 3 individuals put their resources together to allow him to get the training he needed to be an EMT. And the president tells this story to us all the time, and I was there with him, so he doesn't really need to tell it to me all the time. But he says it because those stories impacted his life, his heart, and have driven him with a relentless determination. And what I want to say to you all in closing is we need to excite and invigorate and create that sense of urgency in every American. And I know it's not easy. And I know you feel like you should be able to, with a wave of a wand, have every single petition granted right away. But Sally was right. We need help. We need all your help. We need everybody to roll up their sleeves, as all of you in this room have done time and time again. And remember that those are not folders. Those are lives of people who are parents, siblings, children, loved ones. And let's make the best of this last 8 months to create the momentum we need. And I am more hopeful today than I have been any other day since I've been here about the infinite possibilities. And I am hopeful because of you. Because of you. Because if you can do what you did and overcome the obstacles that were in your way, then shame on our country if we can't do better by you. Shame on us if we can't do better by you. So now, I have the pleasure of introducing to you